Hello everyone and welcome to this Python tutorial. In this tutorial we will learn to test the REST API using the request library. So let's begin. Python request library is very much helpful when you are actually testing the REST APIs. We know that Selenium does not support the testing of the APIs, but what you can do is that you can utilize those request library and you can test the APIs, and you can also utilize that library in your automation testing. So in our previous tutorials, one of the previous tutorials where we were automating the broken images, we utilized that library. So let me show you this one. And this is our basically a Selenium project. We are learning the Selenium here with the Python. And here you see that we are using this request. And using that request library, this is not from the Selenium. This is coming from the Python. It's a Python library, and utilizing this one, I was actually able to test the broken images, right? So using the same one, we can test the REST APIs. So let me show you how we can do this. So let me create one new file here. I'm naming it as REST API. And in this particular tutorial, let's go and test with the get method. And obviously we are not opening the browser, so I will not be using the Selenium library. I will be simply using the request library and test my API. So for that, the first thing I really need is that I need to import the request library. And now, when we are talking about the REST APIs, we have one thing known as a base URL. Then we have the endpoints, right? So first, let's create a variable called base_URL, and here we will be provide the URL. So for this particular tutorial, let me open the browser here, and let's go with this APIs request.in, and here let's go with the fetching the single user. If I click on this one, you will see that it will fetch the user details here, and this is the complete path. So let me copy this one from here, and let me go back to the PyCharm here, and let me provide this URL here. So here till.in is basically a base URL, and rest is known as a endpoint. So let me remove this from here, and let me create one more variable called endpoint, and endpoint is equals to this one. Now we have the base URL and endpoint, and now what we can do is that we can form a complete URL. So URL is equals to base URL plus endpoint. So it will make us a complete request for the get method. Okay, and now utilize this import request library. So what I'll do is that I'll create a variable called response, and using this one, I will say, you see that request dot, and we have this get, we have post. You see that get, we have post, we have session, we have codes, status codes, right? We have a delete, patch, put. So we can test all these APIs. So in this particular tutorial, we are just focusing on the get one. So simply I will go with this get one here, and here I simply need to provide the URL because my URL contains both the endpoint in the base URL. So now you might have a question that why I have created this separate base URL and endpoint, because tomorrow when you are working on the real-time project, your endpoint might get changed, your base URL might get changed. So you need to keep it separate in order to make it more flexible and more in terms of modifying, and less efforts in terms of modifying your code. So that's why you need to keep it separate. Otherwise you can have a single URL and you keep all the complete URL over here, but this is not recommended. So Now using this one, we are just sending a request. So what I will do is that let's see if I send this request. So what are we getting in this response variable? Let me copy this response variable from here and paste it here. And now let's run this one and see what happens. So we are getting response 200, and that's what we are getting. Apparently look like we are not getting much information. So basically what we need to do is that in order to get the more information, so let me unpack. So response dot. So from response, what we need, either we need a status code, we need a JSON. So if I go with this JSON, and now if I run this one here, you see that we are getting a response. So we have successfully, requested for this get API, and we are getting this particular response here if we use response.json here, right? So let me remove this line from here, and for this particular tutorial we can simply use if and else to verify the response. So if response dot, you see that we have the status code. So if we say that status code is equals to 200, this means the request is working fine, right? So if this is the case, then I will say print, then print what? Print request is successful. I need to put in the quotes. Request is successful and status code is 200. Else, what we do say, else I can print something. Your API is not working. Request is not successful. Okay, so this is what I'm printing into this one. And also what you can print is that if the request is successful, then we can also print the here, just like we can print the response here. So response dot json. So it will print this message: your request is successful and status code is 200. And then we are also printing the response. This is the response we are getting. So let me run this one and see what happens. So you see that the request is successful and the status code is 200, and we are printing the response we are getting from this particular API. So in this way, you can utilize this request library to test the APIs if you're using the Selenium automation, right? Even if you're using any other tool, you can utilize this Python request library to test the APIs. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Python tutorial. In this tutorial, we will learn to test the REST API with the post method using the Python request library. So let's begin. In our previous tutorial, we learned that how we can test the REST API with the get method. And when we talk about the put, post and patch, these are different from the get, because in put, patch, we need to send a body to the server. And if you see this example where we learn how to test the get API, here we are not sending any data to the server, right? So again, for this tutorial we will be using the same APIs, and let me open this one. So let me go to the browser here and open this website, and let's pick up the post call from here. And Here we have this create user. So we have this create user. So let me open this one here. So this is the call and this is the body which we need to send to the server. Now let's go to the Python here and let me copy this lines of code from here so that we don't need to write each and everything again and again. So let me create a new file, and here I will be naming it as REST API underscore post method. And let's paste this one here. The base URL is basically remains same here because this is the base URL /in, and then we have this is the endpoint, right? So let me copy this one and let me go back here, and here let me provide the endpoint here. So this is a complete path, and let me confirm this from here. So request.in/API/users. Yes. Now instead of using this get here, what we need to do is that we need to go with the post call. So you can use the put and patch in the similar way, right? So post, and here now what we need to provide, we need to provide a URL as well as we need to provide a JSON body, right? So let's first define the JSON body here, or the payload. So before the request, what I will do is that I will say payload or the JSON body is equals to, and here I need to provide the JSON. So let me go back here, go to the website. So this is the JSON which we need to send to the server. So let me copy this one and let me paste it here. Now we have the URL, we have the payload, we have created a request for the post. Now what we need to do is that we need to provide a URL here and we need to provide a payload. If you provide a payload here in this way, you will get a failure. And let me show you why you will get a failure. Let me run this file and let me show you. You will see that the request is not successful. In case of successful, it will be printing the response if we are getting the response status code equals to 200. So in order to define a payload, what we need to do is that we need to add a keyword called data equals to payload here, and this payload is basically a name of this particular variable. Now if I execute this one, it should give us a status code 200, and if this is the case, we should also be printing the response, right? So the request is post, URL, data, everything is good to go. Now let's run this one and see what happens. So right now still we are getting some issue here and we are getting request is not successful. Okay, so this else block is running, and if I go here, yeah, so basically the response is basically the expected response code is 201, not 200. So if I go back here and if I change it to 201, now this time it should work. Yes, the request is successful and the status code is basically, let me change it to 1 and let me run it again. So the request is successful and the status code is 201 and we are getting the complete response here. So in this way, you can actually test the post API, and in a similar way, you can test the put and patch. So let me summarize this one. So we are creating a complete URL using the base URL endpoint. We are defining our JSON payload. Then using the request library, we are using the post, and inside this, we are passing the URL and the payload. And how we need to send a payload? We need to use this keyword called data equals to, and then we need to provide a variable. This is the variable we used, and then we are simply using if else to make sure that our request is successful or not. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this Python tutorial. In this tutorial we will learn to test the REST API having the query parameters using the Python request library. So let's begin. In our previous tutorial we learned that how we can test the REST API with the post method, and we know that in the post we need to send a body to the server as well, right? In this particular tutorial we will learn how to test the REST API having the query parameters. So first let's understand about the query parameters. So for this tutorial again I will be going to this particular website, and here let's go to any particular API. So this is the get API, and here after the users you see that we have a question mark and then we have page equals to 2. So basically this is a query parameter. We are sending a parameter to this particular request. So if I click on this one, so this is the request basically. So we have this base URL followed by the endpoint, and after the endpoint this is a query parameter which we are sending to the server. Now let's open this into the PyCharm here, and let me create one new Python file here, and I'm naming it as REST API, and I'm saying this as query _params. So this is a file, and what I will do is that I will copy the previous get call request which we learned earlier. So let me copy this one and paste it here, and now we have the base URL. So this is a base URL, we have the endpoint, and we have completed our URL using the combination of the both. And now what we need is that we need our parameters, because this particular API is sending the parameters page equals to 2, right? So what we need to do is that we need to define our parameters, and we'll pass those parameters into the request because they are a part of the request, get request, right? So before sending a request, what I'll do is that I will create a variable called parameters, and here I will have those parameters. So parameters will be in the form of these brackets, and here we need to give a value in terms of the pair, key and pair. Like one value would be key, other would be a pair. So key and value combination will be used here. So that is page. We need to have this in the quotes, basically double quotations. So page colon and then the value is 2. So we have defined this value here in terms of this variable, and now we need to use this in this particular request. So in order to use this in a request, what we need to do is that we need to use a keyword called parents equals 2, and we need to provide this value here, and that's it. Now let's run this one and see what happens here. So it should run successfully, and yes, it's got successfully executed, and we got the status 200 here, and we are getting the complete whole response. But the problem here is that we haven't changed this endpoint here. So basically the API is /API/users /API/users, and we don't want to have this one because we are using the query parameters to fetch all the users here. So let's run this one again and see. So it got executed successfully, and you see that this is a page 2 and all the details are here. See, so that's how you can test the REST API having the parameters. Okay, so you just need to define the parameters in the URL here using the params, and you need to define the parameters in the terms of the pair and the value, so key and value. So this is the key and this two is a value, and you need to define in this format, and then you need to pass this into this request.get. So you need to provide the URL, and you also need to provide the parameters, and that's it. And this request will be executed successfully. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial. Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial we will learn to chain the APIs using the Python request library. So let's begin. First let's understand what is API chaining, and then we will see how we can achieve this using the Python request library. So for this one, let me show you in the notepad. So basically we talk about API chaining. This means that we will be extracting a value from one API, then we will be saving that value in a variable, and finally we will be passing that variable to other APIs. So basically we'll be extracting a value from one API and then we'll passing that value to the other APIs. This is known as the API chaining, and this is a very real-time example. And let me show you the example because most of the applications are basically starting with the login, right? So you need to log in and then you need to perform some actions. So when we talk about the login API, okay, so it will return us usually a token. So this token will actually tell us that I am an authenticated user. Okay. So then, for example, we have another API to add a comment. Okay. And we need to ensure that this user, for example, this is a user for this user is testing funder. And this testing funder will be doing a comment over here, right? So for this testing funder needs to be logged in. So using the API, it will return a token. Okay, so here we will get a token value. This will show that testing funder is authenticated and logged in. And now using this one, I will pass this value in another API. Okay, so this is comments API, and this comments API will take this token value here, okay, so that this testing funder can add a comment. So in any kind of applications, you have a different APIs where you need to extract a value and pass it to the other to make it dynamic and in order to automate your APIs. Okay, and for this particular tutorial, let me show you this particular website. Let me copy this one and let me open this into the browser. And here we have this login API, and you see that this is a login API, and this is a post call. It contains the headers and it contains this username and password, and this will expire in 30 minutes. And then we have another API, and here you see that we are getting the current user authentication. So we will be providing the token here. Okay, so if I hit this API, it will return me. So if I click on show output, so you see that we are getting this token value. Okay, so this value I need to extract from this particular API response, and then I need to pass this token here in the headers authorization. Then it will actually show me that this is the user and I am authenticated. Okay, so let's do this. And for this one, let me open the Python here, and let me create new Python file, and I will say REST API underscore, let me say it, API chaining. So the first thing is that we need to import the request. So import request, then base URL, base underscore URL is equals to, so base URL is basically, we talk about this authentication API, so base URL is always till .com. So let me copy this one and let me provide this value here, and then we have endpoint, and endpoint is basically the value after this particular URL. So I'll go here, and so this is slash login. So let me copy this one and paste it here. So now it will make a complete URL, right? So URL is equals to base URL and plus the endpoint. Okay, now we are ready for executing this request. And if we talk about this request has the headers as well, so we need to provide the headers. In our previous tutorial we learned that how we can provide the query parameters, and we also learned that how we can send this body as well, but we haven't learned about the headers as of now. So let's see how we can provide the headers, because this needs a header. And here the point here is that they are specifying a content type which is application/JSON, right? So it will create a trick here, and let me go back again, and here I will say headers, and here I need to provide the header. So let me go back and copy the headers from here, the complete this one, and paste it here. Just ensure that we will be using a double quotes here, so we'll be changing to double quotes instead of the single quotes. So once we have header, now we need to define a payload. So payload is equals to, and I'll go back, so this is a payload, right? So let me copy this one and paste it here, and again here we need to provide these values in the double quotes. So all values will be in the double quotes instead of the expiration in minutes, because this is integer value, and if we provide quotes against this one, this will consider this value as a string value, but this key needs to be in the double quotes, right? So we have provided this one, and now the thing which we need to do is that we need to use JSON.dumps. Okay, why we need to do this? Let me show you. So I'm creating a variable called JSON_data equals to JSON dot. So we have this dumps. Okay, and if I hover on this one, hover again, okay, so it will serialize object to a JSON format string, because in the header we are saying that the content type would be JSON, so that's why it will serialize the object to a JSON format, and this is what we need to do in order to run this API, else it will throw an error. So I will pass this object here. Okay, and now response is equals to request dot post, and now we need to provide the URL. Then we need to provide the headers using a headers keyword, and it is headers. Let me copy this one from here and paste it here. Then besides header, we also need to provide a data, which is a payload here, and I will paste it here. So now our request is complete. It's a post request. It contains the URL, headers, and the payload. Okay, and now let's print the response here. Print and print the response, and let's run this one and see what happens here. So let's run this one. So it says response equals to 400. This means that there is some problem. Okay, so let me go here, and sometimes there is an intention problem, so let me do it in this way. Okay, and now this one is response. Let's run this one. Says response equals to 400. So 400 means that the request is not successful, and let's figure it out why this is happening, because the request should work fine here, and payload data equals to payload, headers equals to headers, and URL equals to URL. Yeah, the problem is basically is that we have serialized the object, so we will be not passing the payload here. We will be passing this JSON underscore data instead, this one, right? Now it should work, and it should send us the response 200, right? So far it is good, and now what we need to do is that we need to extract a response, and from the response we need to extract the token, right? So response underscore JSON is equals to response dot JSON, and from this one we need to extract a token. So I will say token is equals to response underscore JSON, and from that we need to extract a token. Okay, and if I go here, let me confirm the parameter. So the parameter is token, right? And now once we have a token, let's print this one and see either we are getting a token or not. So print, and let's print this token and run this one. So you see that we are getting this token over here. Now what we need to do is that we need to pass this token into the other API. So the base URL would remain same. The endpoint is cheese. So I will call the endpoint, this is as endpoint 1, and here I will provide the endpoint for the other API. So the other API is that auth/me, right? So let me copy the endpoint, and here this is a get call. Okay, so I'll go back here, provide the endpoint. So base URL already defined, we have defined the endpoint. Now this is our another URL, so I will call it as URL1. So URL1 is basically base underscore URL, then plus endpoint1. Now we have defined this, and we know that in the headers we need to provide this authentication token, right? So if I go back and let me show you, so you see that here in the headers we need to provide this one, right? So simply what we need to do is that we need to define headers. Now already there's one headers variables defined, so I will call it as headers1, and here we need to provide the headers. So we need to provide the key. So key is basically authorization, and we'll provide the value of this one. And let me go back here. So authorization, then colon, now F, okay, and then we have bearer, and now here we need to provide a value. Okay, so once we have this one, actually we need to provide the double quotes over here. Okay, so now we have successfully passing this token into this second API, right? And after the headers, now here I will say response 1 is equals to requests dot get, because it's a get call, and we need to pass a URL, and this will be a URL1 here, and then the headers. So headers equals to headers1. And now after hitting this one, let me print the response. So I will say response1 dot JSON. And now I think we are good to go, and let's run this one and see what happens. So you see that our first request was successful. We have extracted the token, but here it says that miss invalid token, right? So here in this particular request is saying that this is an invalid token, right? So this means that this value is some problem. So I give a space over here, and now let's see. So again it says that invalid token. Let's see why this is happening, because this would be F bearer, bearer authorization, and this looks good to me. Let's see what is happening here. So URL1 equals to base URL and endpoint 1. So base URL is this one. So this is the base URL, and this is this value, and this is the value of the second endpoint. So let's go to the website here and see this, how this bearer. Okay, so basically what I think is that there's a space between the bearer and this one, so this might be the reason here. And now let's run this one, and yes, so this time the first request was successful. We extracted the token, and which is passed into the second request. Now we are getting this response. So if I go here and see, so this is the response we are getting, right, by passing this one. So let me summarize this whole code and the concept of API chaining here. So basically the API chaining is that we will be extracting a value from one API. We will be saving this into a variable. We'll be passing this variable to the other APIs to make a chain of the APIs, so that whenever you execute or automate those APIs, it will pick up the dynamic value every time and it should execute every time, right? So just like I give an example of login API. So you need to log in, extract the token and pass this token to the other APIs. And if I go back to the code here, so let me summarize this code. So we are providing the base URL, we are providing the endpoint, we are creating a complete URL, we are providing the headers over here, we are providing the payload here, we are using JSON.jumps. So basically the purpose of using this one to serialize, okay, so over this one here to show you again. So it will serialize the object to a JSON format string. If I don't do this, it will fail, right? And in our this tutorial, if I pass this payload directly, so we are getting the failure. So we need to pass this serialized value, okay? And once we have this one, we are getting the response, and from the response from the JSON, we are actually extracting a token here, and we are printing the token here. Then we are providing a second endpoint, then creating a URL for the second API, providing this extracted token to the second API and getting the response. So in this way, you can make the API chains if we are using request library, Python request library, to test and automate your APIs. And also what you can do is that here what I'm doing is I'm giving an endpoint one name, or like this one, you can name it properly so that you can understand which API you are testing and with which API you're making a chain of the other API. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. If you like our content, then do like, comment, share and subscribe our channel. Once again, thank you so much and see you in the next tutorial.